On Thursday, May 1st, the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, with help from the UAP Disclosure Fund, held the briefing called Understanding UAP, Science, National Security, and Innovation. It focused on UFOs, or UAPs as they're now called, and what the government knows about these unusual sightings. Louise Alzando, a former Pentagon official who investigated UAPs before becoming a UFO whistleblower, and Avi Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist, who I talk about all the time on this channel, were the main speakers. And they're pushing for the government to release more UAP data and for the development of better ways of detecting these unidentified objects. The hearing was led by Representative Anna Paulina Luna, the Republican congresswoman from Florida charged by President Trump with overseeing the disclosure of several classified events, including UFO sightings. But in a moment that should have been the highlight of the presentation, when Louise Alzando held aloft a photo of a UFO allegedly taken by a commercial airline pilot at high altitude, turned out that this photo was quickly debunked within hours of the presentation, putting Mr. Alzando's credibility on the line and, in my opinion, really damaging the entire hearing's credibility with the media. However, things that are being overlooked as a result of this moment are other photos that were quite intriguing indeed, including a Tic Tac UFO on the surface of Mars. Good afternoon, UFO enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Alien Bulletin. I actually intended to get this out yesterday because this presentation in front of members of Congress happened a few days ago now, but then the whole Trump budget came out, eviscerating NASA, et cetera, regardless of how you think about the whole topic. That's something that absolutely had to take priority, but now it's time to talk about this event, this next step in the whole congressional presentation process that will hopefully eventually lead to some degree of disclosure, that will hopefully lead to Congress actually doing something about the UAP phenomenon rather than just listening. But before I get to any more of that, I need to go ahead and just wipe one particular extremely embarrassing negative thing off my plate, or rather off the plate of the UAP experts that were making that presentation in front of members of Congress. And this is, of course, Louise Alzando, who I definitely respect the guy. I mean, he's ex-military. Anybody who's served in the military, I certainly have respect for, and he's definitely put himself out there as a big advocate for UFO disclosure, if you want to call it that. But he had his moment. He had his moment to present evidence that we had never seen before, that the public hadn't seen before. I mean, according to what this guy says, he gets so much sent to him all the time, most of which he can't reveal because of national security obligations, or, he could get prosecuted if he reveals some of this evidence, et cetera, et cetera. But he had his moment where he could display something to the world that we had not seen before, and he went and displayed this. And even though this photo was momentarily intriguing, allegedly taken by a commercial airline pilot at high altitude, and if that were indeed the case, we're talking about a UFO the size of a cruise liner here, that to begin with would make somebody a little suspicious. Something that gigantic seen from the air, and yet nobody on the ground saw it. Who knows? But regardless, it took a few hours for this photo to be completely and embarrassingly debunked. It turns out, for anybody that's flown over the Midwest, and this is why I find it very difficult to believe that an experienced commercial pilot actually took this photograph and believed that it was a UFO. Anybody who's flown over the Midwest or vast regions of Texas and Oklahoma, you've seen these circular fields fields that are irrigated, in environments that don't have a lot of rainfall. And so therefore it really stands out, the areas that are irrigated in a circular pattern by sprinkler systems, essentially, that work in this pattern along with plowing, that sort of thing. So these perfect circles that you can see from the air, and all this UFO was two of these circles right next to each other, seen from an angle that made it look like an enormous UFO with a shadow underneath it. But once again, any experienced commercial airline pilot, or indeed anybody who flies over this region of the country with any regularity, would definitely know what this thing was. So the fact that this was sent to Mr. Elizondo by a commercial airline pilot who thought it was a UFO, I find that a little difficult to believe. I think it was either a hoax, somebody who was trying to embarrass him, and you know what? They succeeded. Or somebody who wasn't a pilot, somebody with a lot less experience who saw this from the air and let their mind play tricks on them. As I say, I have seen these things from the air over and over and over again, and never have I mistaken them for a UFO or even thought that they might be a UFO. And believe me, I look for UFOs all the time in my frequent travels across the middle of the United States and elsewhere. So unfortunately, this one event has defined so much of this presentation that took place, and it is a real bummer because there was a lot of very compelling scientific information shared by Dr. Avi Loeb and others about UAPs that added a tremendous amount of scientific credibility, shall we say, to the entire phenomena. It was a very, very interesting presentation with several well-known speakers, and some of them not so well-known, who had a lot of fascinating information to share about the UAP/UFO phenomenon. So now that I've gotten the embarrassing stuff out of the way, and hopefully Mr. Elizondo can restore his credibility a little bit here in the near future, let's go ahead and get to the serious stuff. Dr. Avi Loeb gave a full 20-minute presentation at the UAP congressional briefing, and I can give you the highlights that he himself provided on Medium. Very nice of him to do that, so let's just get started. Quote, "Let's be honest, there are objects in the sky that we do not understand. When we do not understand what 85% of the matter in the universe is, we invest billions of dollars to find out the nature of that dark matter. Given that the U.S. government reports about UAPs, I say, let us invest $1 billion in figuring out their nature through rigorous scientific research. If we find that all UAPs are human-made, some by adversarial nations, then at the very least, we will have at our possession state-of-the-art artificial intelligence algorithms and sensor systems that are of great value for national security. If, on the other hand, if 1 in 1 billion of these UAPs happens to be extraterrestrial in origin, the discoverers will be awarded the Nobel Prize. This is a win-win situation. The scientific study of UAP offers a unique opportunity to spend $1 billion on AI and frontier science and make taxpayers happy. There is no bigger scientific question that the public cares about than we are alone. If there are smarter kids on our cosmic block, we can learn from them. Recovering an extraterrestrial gadget might provide us with access to advanced technologies faster than it would take us to develop them from scratch. Our current scientific knowledge is an island in an ocean of ignorance, a civilization that benefited from millennia of science after discovering quantum mechanics might have quantum gravity engineers that attach a negative mass to a payload and allow it to escape gravity without fuel. By the way, I have a video on this topic linked at the end of this video. Loeb showed a cover page of a New York Times Magazine feature story entitled "How a Harvard Professor Became the World's Leading Alien Hunter." wasn't very complimentary, let me tell you. And so anyway, Avi Loeb mentioned that he wasn't happy with that reporting and told the editor, "If we cannot trust what you publish about science, how can we believe what you post about politics?" Subsequently, I described the extensive work done by the Galileo project team, including the construction and operation of 3 new UAP observatories that will collect new data on a few million objects per year by monitoring the sky in the infrared, optical, radio, and audio, and searching for outliers using state-of-the-art AI software. The Galileo project is also planning to search for large pieces of the interstellar object IM-1 using a robot with a video feed. For those of you unfamiliar with that incident, it's a meteor-like object that originated from interstellar space. Its trajectory and speed were too radical for it to be bound to the solar system. It had to come from an interstellar destination, and it crashed off the coast of Papua New Guinea in 2014. Loeb has not ruled out the possibility that this object could have been an alien craft or part of one. According to Loeb, this is a historic discovery because it represents the first time that humans put their hands on materials from a large object that arrived to Earth from outside the solar system. And again, the reason this object is so significant is the fact that it broke up at such a low altitude. Given its size and given its velocity, even if it were constructed out of the most resilient material that meteors tend to be constructed out of, that is to say, nickel iron meteors, it should have disintegrated at a much higher altitude, and the fact that it survived that long indicated that it had to have been constructed of something far more resilient than nickel iron, in other words, something potentially artificial. And the fragments that were found at the bottom of the South Pacific seem to support that assertion because they were very unlike anything we have ever found from a natural meteor. But let's go ahead and continue with further information from other witnesses. Christopher Mellon, a national security expert who spent nearly 20 years in the U.S. intelligence community, suggested that there's a massive cover-up of data that would prove the existence of UFOs visiting Earth. During his presentation, he revealed that the U.S. government has some of the most powerful radar and satellite technology on Earth, but somehow has never recorded any information about UAPs. Quote, "Either we spent billions of dollars on a system that's not performing as it should, or it's simply so highly classified that the information is not reaching AARO. AARO, of course, being the military's department, which assesses the potential threat from UAPs. Mellon noted that the solid-state phased array radar system is one of the most powerful sensor systems on the planet, which would be detected by any extraterrestrial civilization anywhere near Earth. However, the radar system has made 0 reports of UAPs to AARO over the last 20 years, even though hundreds and hundreds of reports about UAPs have been made to AARO from the military and from commercial pilots. How is that possible? Mellon asked. Mellon called on the U.S. Inspector General to look into the lack of reporting coming from the key military radar posts regarding UFO sightings. This comes despite documented reports that the military has scrambled aircraft to follow UFOs that they've detected near U.S. airspace. During a separate panel at the engagement, Tim Gallaudet, who is a retired admiral of the U.S. Navy and also former head of NOAA, pointed to his frustrations with what he referred to as overclassification and a deliberate decades-long disinformation campaign by the U.S. Department of Defense and the intelligence community. He and the other participants further discussed recent examples of UAP encounters shared by commercial pilots and military officials who experienced them firsthand. Quote, "Consider the extraordinary report I received this weekend when a former U.S. Navy SH-6 60 Seahawk helicopter crew chief who was embarked on the carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in 2021, described to me his reporting on forward-looking infrared video of a metallic sphere at an altitude a few hundred feet above the ship, traveling along a linear trajectory horizontal to sea surface before it accelerated into the horizon at incredible speed, disappearing completely upon landing, Gallaudet said. Moreover, this was not an isolated incident for the Eisenhower Strike Group. During that deployment, they saw many instances of UAP, primarily F-18s, frequently encountering them at high altitude, and this topic was widely discussed by the Air Wing during the entire deployment. And in his presentation, by the way, Mellon also detailed multiple reports of what appeared to be drones and swarms of baffling aircraft in restricted military airspace since 2019. For instance, while the average drone is restricted to a flight of 450 feet, he said at Arizona test ranges in 2023, F-35 fighter jet pilots reported encountering drones at up to 35,000 feet, going 500 miles per hour. We don't know what is operating in our airspace, and this continues often in military-sensitive areas. Dr. Anna Brady Estevez, a founding partner of American Deep Tech, a technology investment firm, revealed that companies in the private sector are allegedly building new inventions based on alien systems. Brady Estevez, who previously worked with NASA on space economic policies, said she had funded entrepreneurs who described their inventions as being inspired by UFOs. Quote, they were working on advanced energy. They were working on advanced communications. I funded companies working on what the entrepreneurs later described as UAP adjacent or UAP inspired technologies. She added that these inventors were not allowed to go into detail about their tech because of the classified nature of the research. And then there was research physicist Dr. Eric Davis, who said that the U.S. government has been operating a secret program that recovers crashed UFOs since the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dr. Davis worked as a subcontractor and then as a consultant for the Pentagon UFO program since 2007. According to him, the secret program originated after the discovery of a crashed UFO in 1944. Since then, Davis claimed much of the technology recovered from these wrecks over the years has been secretly moved to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. All of this activity, Davis said, was being done without congressional oversight or approval, with project code names regularly changing every few years to cover up the Defense Department's actions. He previously said that examination of some materials recovered by the program failed to determine their source and led him to conclude we couldn't make it ourselves. But the highlight of the presentation, which the media isn't talking about at all, probably because of that UFO over Texas thing, was the presentation from Mike Gold, a former NASA Associate Administrator, who, by the way, is now the head of Redwire. By the way, I've met this guy at IAC conventions, very serious spaceflight-related conventions, where he is afforded a lot of respect, not because he investigates UFOs, but because the guy's company, Redwire, is doing amazing things in the field of spaceflight. Well, that was the moment when he showed us the Tic Tac on Mars photo. Again, this is not something that he went out to find on his own, but rather something that he found to be pretty interesting from the Mars Curiosity photo data. Now, is this an artificial object? Well, Mike Gold was not going to put his opinions in front of everybody, and he said that he wasn't qualified to make that assessment, but he did say that we need to be examining Mars footage in much greater detail than we are right now, and taking things like this seriously, not dismissing the possibility that there could be artificial objects hovering above the surface of Mars. But in addition, he also described a phenomena called the lunar horizon glow, and it's not just a glow on the horizon of the moon, but in addition to that, it's periodic periodic streaks of light shooting up from the lunar surface, which has been observed by both unmanned probes and NASA astronauts back in the Apollo era, and most recently by the Firefly Blue Ghost lander. I always thought that this particular image was the lunar sunset, but it isn't actually. This was taken long after the sun was gone on the moon, and yet there was this strange lunar horizon glow. And again, NASA has no reasonable explanation for this effect and the other lighting effects that take place on the lunar surface. And considering the other UAP sightings that have happened in close proximity to the moon, this is also a phenomena that warrants further investigation. So once again, a very intriguing presentation in front of a bipartisan group of representatives from Congress. But the big question is anything finally going to come of this? Is Congress going to be able to put sufficient pressure on the U.S. military to reveal a lot more about the UAP phenomena than they currently are to AARO and to the general public? So as compelling as this presentation was, and as happy as I am that members of Congress are continuing to listen with interest to all of these presentations, that they seem compelled to try to do something about this, there is a political matter that really concerns me as to whether or not anything tangible is really going to happen in the U.S. government, regardless of who in Congress happens to be listening. Because before, we had a serious effort on the part of several members of Congress to try to pressure the White House to reveal any information about the UAP phenomena that they may have been hiding. There was a very aggressive push to make all of that happen when Biden was president. But now that Trump has become president and nothing has changed, we have received no new information, that all the explanations about the so-called drone outbreak that happened in New Jersey, all of those explanations from the government are precisely the same as the stories that we got from the Biden administration. Now that all that has happened, these Congress people are largely keeping quiet about the issue compared to the way they were behaving just a year ago. And the reason for that, of course, is obvious. Trump is their erstwhile ally. They can ill afford to make an enemy out of him, so they're going to keep their mouths shut, meaning that the only people in Congress that are likely to do anything about this right now are people who are opposed to the Trump administration. In other words, people who used to support the Biden administration. And assuming that they can get a process going, assuming that Democrats take control of the House and Senate in a couple of years and can start putting pressure on the Oval Office. Well, if a Democrat gets elected, the very same thing is going to happen in 4 years. It appears to me that Congress's interest in the UAP phenomenon is directly proportional to the political ammunition that the phenomena gives them. If investigating UAPs is going to help them in their war against their political opponents, well, then they're definitely going to be leading the charge. But if it doesn't, then they're going to recede into the shadows. I begin to wonder, unfortunately, as to just how genuine any congressman's concern for this whole issue really is, and whether or not we're actually going to see any sort of disclosure from the government, regardless of how many of these presentations take place. But nevertheless, the significance of these events cannot be understated. A few years ago, these sorts of presentations didn't happen in front of Congress. No politician would dare touch the whole UFO phenomena because of the stigma attached to it. And Avi Loeb is right. If we are willing to invest piles and piles of money in investigating things that we don't understand, like dark matter, then why can we not invest $1 billion in a concerted effort to try to solve this problem. If we can take 1,000 unsolved cases and all 1,000 of them turn out to be mundane objects, or if this $1 billion can be used to invest in far more sophisticated detection and reconnaissance devices, and again, 1,000 unidentified objects are detected with this equipment, and all 1,000 of them turn out to be mundane objects, well, all the better. As he said, all that means is the government is going to have much better reconnaissance and much better security at their disposal if they have this sort of equipment. But if only one out of 1,000 objects turns out to be an extraterrestrial piece of technology or an extraterrestrial spacecraft, that will be the biggest scientific discovery in history. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please consider supporting this channel, especially on Patreon. We just released another exclusive video into our library, and on top of that, we've got some new merchandise coming out next week, and I'll give you a little sneak peek at it. It isn't totally completed yet, but I think you can guess what the topic is. Pretty cool, huh? So keep your eyes on the store. Hopefully I'll be rolling this out in the next 24 to 48 hours. Thanks again for watching, and as always, stay angry about space.